All right, guys, what's up? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be starting a tradition that I'm going to be doing maybe either once or twice a year, and that is 10 of the greatest video games that I've ever played, period. From childhood to today, these are going to be 10 of the best that I've ever played. Now, some of them are going to be worthy of anybody's greatest video games ever, and some of them are going to be like WTF. And my answer to that, my response to that is that, well, some people just have an acquired taste, kind of like how some people love Guinness, but a lot of people don't. But some people absolutely love it. So it's kind of like that. Think of it that way. So without further ado, let's get right into the list. And as in traditional fashion on this channel, just because I name one game first doesn't mean it's the worst, and just because I name a certain game last doesn't mean it's the best, and vice versa. So without further ado, let's get onto the list so that way this video doesn't end up being 30 minutes. Siphon Filter absolutely was the game that I saw on a commercial once. I thought it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen when they demonstrated the gameplay in that commercial. I'm pretty sure it was like during a wrestling show that I was watching, either Raw or SmackDown or Nitro or Thunder. And basically I saw Siphon Filter and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and thankfully I was able to get it. And when I played it, I thought it was really cool graphically. I thought the cutscenes looked great. The music, I actually like the music a lot. The theme song, the theme song that you hear in the main menu before you start the game is got a specific type of vibe to it that I'll never forget to this day. And the story was cool. The taser, which is one of the weapons you use, is one of the cheesiest weapons in gaming history, one of the funniest, and one of the most powerful as well. And I really enjoyed the gameplay, and I played it from start to finish, and I absolutely adored it. And it's really a shame that we haven't seen a Siphon Filter pretty much since, I think, the third or fourth game. I think they made 2 or 3 after the first one, and I know my best friend absolutely loved that game, and I absolutely love the first game. And quite frankly, hopefully Sony or whoever has the rights or whatever makes a Siphon Filter for today's generation. I think a lot of players would absolutely love it. And so yeah, let's get on to the second game on the list. Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the greatest games that has ever made. That was a precursor to not only Super Mario World in terms of how Super Mario World was laid out, but also for some other games as well, such as, you know, Donkey Kong Country and a few others, right? Because you'd have like that map layout, and Mario Brothers 3 was that blueprint in terms of what you would do going from level to level, right? It looked like a board game, you know what I mean? And then you'd go in and you play as usual, and of course the gameplay was even smoother, and obviously Mario could do more, which amplified the fun, right? So when you really take it to that other level, and when all the worlds are that different, and then you got the soundtrack to go with it, Mario's able to do more, everything. And Mario 3 literally is one of the greatest games that has ever been made, in my opinion, but I also think that a lot of people would agree with me for similar reasons that I've mentioned, and there was no way that I was leaving it off this list. And without further ado, let's go on to the next one. Now, the first Sonic the Hedgehog helped put Sega on the map. There's no doubt about it. The creators of Sega wanted a way to compete with Mario, and they came up with Sonic the Hedgehog. Okay, great. And then with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, they managed to actually perfect the formula in terms of gameplay. They changed a few things from the first one, such as the bonus levels for how you get the Chaos Emeralds. And even the graphics look slightly better in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and the music was absolutely chef's kiss. To this day, ever since the first Sonic the Hedgehog game for the Genesis, and up to even what we get these days, the music still remains amazing. And if you're looking at the classic Sonic games, like the Sonics of the 90s, I'm telling you, man, the music, it's going to be some of the best music you've ever heard, period. Now, granted, there's also a lot of contenders with some of the greatest music, but Sonic the Hedgehog just has its I can't really describe it. You have to basically listen to it, and if you were there at that time, you will know exactly what I mean. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, in terms of the classic Sonic games, with all due respect to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, with all due respect to Sonic and Knuckles, and of course with all due respect to the original, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to me is peak Sonic the Hedgehog in terms of classics. The only game that, in my opinion, surpasses the Sonic the Hedgehog classics is probably Sonic Mania that came out in 2017. And that says quite a lot. And of course, an honorable mention to Sonic CD. All right, let's move on to the next game on the list. Demon's Crest for the SNES is a game that I didn't even own. So here's the story. My best friend at the time calls me and he says he's got this game, right? And he can't beat it. He's at the second to last boss. He can't beat it. When he comes over to have a sleepover, we're going to tag team it together. We're going to change controllers. We're going to take turns whenever we die or whatever it is. And then I'm going to take on the sub boss. And then if we ever get to the last boss, we're going to take turns, see who does better, and then finish it off from there. And the first time he came over, we didn't beat it. And then the second time he did, we finally did it. It was like a major celebration. But Demon's Crest had a really unique soundtrack. It had a really unique gameplay. It was almost like Mega Man in a sense, because when you would beat let's say a major character that you would get awarded a crest, you would have a different abilities and you'd have a different appearance, which enhanced the gameplay, kind of like Mega Man. But Demon's Crest did it in its own way. And it even had a very small flavor of open worldness to where you could travel in terms of which crests and stuff like that you wanted to go after. There was an upgrade system, a purchase system, and stuff like that. Demon's Crest had so many good things going for it. The only thing that I would say that was lacking in terms of what players are saying today, when I've seen some of the nostalgic YouTube videos talking about the game all these years later, is that it was a little bit on the short end, even for the times back then, but I don't think too many people cared all that much, to be honest. But at the same time, I don't know exactly what people thought of Demon's Crest when it was out back in the day. There was no social media, and my best friend at the time was the only other person that played it other than myself. However, there's nothing but good things to be said about this game, and to top it all off, if you actually are looking for the cartridge of Demon's Crest today, it is one of the most expensive cartridges on demand, period. And it's because it's so rare and the game was good. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on to the next game on the list. And this is a game that I was totally not familiar with. And it was, back in the day, sometimes you just look at the back of the box art for the game and you look at the screenshots and you'd be like, wow, this looks really cool. And back then I was actually kind of had a really kind of obsession with space combat games, or games that were like Star Fox. And I really liked that. But Panzer Dragoon did it in its own way. I really liked it. I loved how the game looked and how it played, and it actually became very nostalgic. And while I had it, and while I played it on the Saturn, which I did have, I was one of the few people that had a Saturn, it was a game that I absolutely played a ton of. And I don't regret it one bit. It was something that was brand new, and I completely and totally fell in love with it when I had it in my hands, and I just continued to try to play it and to beat it, and I don't think I ever did, but I remember playing it for quite a long time, and every single second of the experience was absolutely enjoyable. So let's move on to the next game on the list. Need for Speed Most Wanted for the 360 to this day remains to be my favorite racer ever. First of all, the cutscenes for that game looked absolutely incredible. The regular graphics and the gameplay looked great. Every racer you had to race in terms of the main cast, whenever you weren't doing side missions in the open world to where you could choose from, were like boss battles, which was really cool. But there was also this gameplay mechanic to where you'd have bullet time, to where you can go in slow-mo on demand, right? For whenever you wanted, whenever you had a hard turn or something like that, and it was really cool. The soundtrack to the game was absolutely incredible, and you just had all the freedom in the world. And even though I never beat the game, to this day, it was probably the most fun racing game I've ever played. I know that there's been other really great racing games that have been made ever since then, no doubt about it. But for me personally, the one that stands out the most is Need for Speed Most Wanted. I played Gran Turismo for a bit. I've played Wipeout for a bit. I played Project Gotham Racing for a bit, but I will tell you that the one that stands out for me personally is Need for Speed Most Wanted for the 360. So without further ado, let's get on to the next game on the list. When Mortal Kombat was reigning supreme, Killer Instinct came out of nowhere. It turned people's heads because of how the game sounded, how the game looked, how the game played, the announcer, the combo system, a little bit of Mortal Kombat in there in terms of the finishers and stuff, cool characters, a cool roster, and an amazing soundtrack. An amazing soundtrack. And fun fact, I was one of the first 10,000 people that purchased Killer Instinct, because I would find out, thanks to the power of the internet and today, that the first, I think 10,000 or 20,000 people that would buy the game for the home versions would also get the soundtrack on CD. And back then CD was, you know, something new. And I would get it. And that's how I knew, because I'm like, oh, what's this? And even though I just played the game and I hardly listened to the CD, I will say that the soundtrack for classic Killer Instinct is definitely incredible. So from a gameplay perspective, you know, when you have a game that takes me away from my favorite fighting game franchise of all time, which is Mortal Kombat, when it's at its peak, that in and of itself is an accomplishment. And I was 10 years old when I saw it in the arcades. And when it finally came out, I grinded the hell out of it on the Super Nintendo, and I absolutely loved every second of it. So that is why it is on this list. So let's go on to the next one. Star Wars Dark Forces was my first-person shooter experience. And I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a PC. I went to my best friend's house, who ended up moving to a different part of the state that was 2 hours away. And for the summer, I stayed with him and his family for 2 weeks. And one of the games that we played during that time on his dad's PC or computer was Star Wars Dark Forces. It was the first time I'd ever seen a legit cutscene in a video game, which was really cool. And it was my first-person shooter experience. And it was also my first mouse and keyboard experience. And as an introduction to the genre of first-person shooters, as well as how the game played and how the game looked, man, oh man, did I want one of those for myself. But obviously we could not afford it in terms of that time and everything like that, so it is what it is. But absolutely, Star Wars Dark Forces was absolutely an amazing experience. It was a brief experience, but it was one of the best experiences that I ever had at that time in gaming, and it remains very strong to this day. I'll never forget it. It was very nostalgic, and it was my introduction to what would be first-person shooters. All right, let's move on to the next one. So God of War 2 was PlayStation 2's, you know, riding into the sunset, so to speak, right? Because the PlayStation 3 was either coming out or was already out. But Sony Santa Monica had decided to make God of War 2 for the PlayStation 2, and it absolutely sold like hotcakes. It absolutely sold amazingly well, and it surpassed the first game. It was a longer game than the first game. It offered more gameplay options in terms of weapons, boss fights in particular, and of course the story continued to progress, that Kratos was now a god and everything like that. It literally like made everything that was so good about the first game, and it took everything that was so good about the first game and it amplified it. And fun fact, I remember I was actually sick when I got the game, and lo and behold, I actually had a 3-day weekend. So basically I would just rest up and just eat and then sleep, and then eventually when I woke up the first day after, you know, after being sick, I played the game like on Friday morning, I believe it was, and I played it like nonstop, only stopping to, you know, sleep or to eat or to shower, stuff like that, to you know, throughout the entire weekend. And I finished it on Sunday, of course, and I thought it was one of the greatest games I ever played. And to this day, I would say it's one of the greatest games that has ever been made. God of War 2 is just absolutely legendary, and it was a hell of a way to end the PlayStation 2 era of games. And I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. All right, let's move on to the final game on the list. I mean, imagine a world deep underwater, right? Like, just the thought of that sounds so beautiful, right? But at the same time, a lot of messed up shit happens. Like, things have gone horribly wrong. It actually took place, like, you know, many decades ago, so it wasn't during modern times, which made everything unique in terms of how it looked and what the weapons were, and you had the big daddies and the little sisters. And just an FYI, I managed to actually free all the little sisters instead of harvesting them when I played through Bioshock for the first time. And through and through, it was an absolutely wonderful experience. There were puzzles in the game. There were like ways that you can upgrade your weapons that was very unique. It had a very dark tone to it. The atmosphere of Bioshock was absolutely immersive. And it even had a little bit of a horrorness to it, right? In terms of the splicers and who you had to, who were your like main enemies, and of course you had your big daddies. And then the way you would just upgrade yourself and everything, and the abilities that you gain. Bioshock has literally everything you could ask for in a single player first person shooter. And obviously it was the first of the franchise, and it absolutely hit a home run. I don't think anybody could say that Bioshock isn't a contender for one of the greatest games ever made. Bioshock, from a story perspective, is amazing. From a technical perspective and a gameplay perspective, it is amazing. It is very immersive. It looks very good. It plays very good. And it was, I would even go as far as to say that in terms of just, I mean, it just goes to show you that we didn't know just how good we had it, right? But we played Bioshock and we had it good. But looking back from where we are, in terms of where we are now, Bioshock has aged very well. They remastered the first two games for a reason. And it's because it is that good. So with that being said, guys, that is my list of 10 of the greatest video games that I've ever played. So with that being said, I want to know, in terms of my list, of this first list, so to speak, what do you guys think of these games that I've mentioned, and any particular memories of nostalgia, or anything you want to share in the comment section would be great. And in terms of 10 of the greatest games that you guys have ever played throughout your years of gaming, what is your list? I really want to know, what is your list? So with that being said, guys, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.